The Sciforror Film Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sciforror Film Podcast. This again is an extra episode in which I will be interviewing James Allen, the director of the film Ash Sunday that I saw at the Romford Horror Film Festival. Hi James, thanks for joining me.
Hello, Andy. Good to be here.
Good, good. So, just tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got to here as far as your filmmaking is concerned.
Well, I've always been fascinated by film and TV from a very young age, but I'm one of those people that I kind of stumbled around exactly what my kind of place in it was for a while. Like when I was at school, I used to do a lot of clay motions, sort of like the
All
Wallace
right.
animations, and well, I would make short films with my Star Wars action figures, sort of reenacting bits from the movies, things like that. And I kind of at first wanted to do that, and then I don't know what happened. I think I let the career advisors talk me out of it at school, and
Yeah.
I ended up going down the academic route and figuring I would do a sort of a grown-up job and look at doing writing and sort of telling stories on the side. And I ended up doing I think a master's degree in history, and it was when I finished my um, dissertation for that, and the faculty complained that it was too narrative and cinematic, and there wasn't enough sort of analysis of text and that kind of thing. I thought, you know what? I'd been writing a bit on campus and still joining writing groups and doing things for the student TV station. I thought I'm just going to write a screenplay,
That's
and I
fine.
went to the London Screenwriters Festival. And if anyone is interested in this at all, that festival changed my life. It's back this year in end of April, and
Yeah.
I've gone every year since because um, it changed my life. And I decided at that I was going to I was going to chase screenwriting, and I think within the next year I started directing shorts. And really post COVID, I've sort of looked at the industry and gone, I've been sort of making money doing script reads, doing sort of consultation. I now work sort of part-time at a little company doing that.
Right.
But I looked at the state of the industry and where I was, and I basically just realized there's so many paths in, and at the moment my path is getting my scripts made however I can, and however I can is usually to make them myself. And so
Yeah.
I've gone into directing kind of out of necessity and realized as a result of that that I actually like doing it. And so it's it's frustrating in a way because deep down I always wanted to be a filmmaker. Like it was one of those things that
It,
I always wanted to tell stories on film, but it never occurred to me that I would be allowed to, you know?
I think, yeah, I think there's a few people I've talked to who kind of like they feel like they missed out on sort of like 5 or 10 years of being able to make films because they always thought they needed to do a proper job and study proper things rather than just doing what they really wanted to do.
Or there's the thing of that, I mean, I often wonder about this is that because I never really went to film school or anything like that. And I mean, it's really, it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I mean, I've no doubt that had I gone to film school, I would be a lot more sort of technically savvy, and I would probably have a lot more context and have done a lot more work by now. But it's a thing of looking back. I wouldn't change it too much because I feel like life has a way of giving you content,
Yeah,
and the other stuff that you do, you end up using a lot more than you would think in the especially if you're like a writer director. It's having done other things in life other than gone straight into filmmaking from school does kind of give you a perspective. It gives you something to say, and so it is a tricky one. I kind of ultimately I have no regrets about it, but and it's the thing if you can. The lovely thing about film is because it's so collaborative, you can just collaborate with people who have done that. And
yeah, yeah. I mean, from my point of view, I haven't been to film school or anything like that. Although I have done some courses, things like that. And I think sometimes having talked to a lot of people who are filmmakers and also a lot of artists, I think film school and art college and things like that are very similar in as much as they give you a lot in the way of technical knowledge and the way of knowing, ideas as far as technical stuff goes and things like that. But they don't necessarily teach you how to do it because a lot of that is just
mm,
instinctual. It's like it comes from you make the films that you want to make. You can make the most technically competent film in the world, and it will still not be a great film because of the fact that it just doesn't have the content or the emotional feel that a good film needs to have.
that's a really good point actually, because it's a thing. Because what one thing that I did do for about 10 years was I joined an extras agency, and I would do sort of supporting artist work on sort of big films that were being shot in the UK or TV shows and that kind of thing. And what I appreciated about doing that was you could see every kind of aspect of production,
Mm.
and you could see the bits where people were kind of buzzing and excited and sort of happy with their work. You could see the bits where the crew were getting annoyed,
Yeah,
and you can also see um, you can sort of see the ripple effect of the director's decisions and what happens. And there's been a number of films that I worked on, and I mean, like there was one particular huge, great big franchise piece, and we spent a fortnight doing a minute scene, and they shot this from every angle under the sun. Like that they were going close up, long, wide. Let's do an angle from over here. Let's do one between this guy's legs. Let's do one between that guy's legs. And it's like I know that you need coverage for the edit, but I thought there is no way in hell they need this much.
no, no,
And it's a thing of I just thought, well, when I read scripts, or sometimes even when I read sort of novels, things like that, I can sort of see in my head, okay, this is the bit where we cut to this guy, and it's about this angle, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
When I first started making films, I would be really, really sort of. I mean, I think on my first film that I did, the um when we were editing it, I was driving everyone crazy. But the actors said that I've never seen a film shoot this efficient because I basically just went and we're going to get this shot, then we're going to get that shot, and
yeah,
that's what we need because that's. And it's, I'm not quite that sort of austere with it now, but it is a thing that I do like. There are some times when I feel like, did the director actually know what scene he wanted to make when he came in today? Because
Yeah.
it's it's so easy to waste time on film sets, and yeah, it's like there's definitely a sort of a sane middle ground to be found there.
I think, I mean, having worked on a few films as an extra, and having starred in one short film myself, I became very appreciative of how much work was done by a lot of the people that kind of get overlooked on the crew. The short film I did, that I starred in, there was a wonderful woman on there who was like, her whole job was making sure that every time we went for a take, everything on the set was in exactly the right place.
Mm.
And I thought, without her, the continuity of this entire film would fall apart.
And yeah, and it's especially if it's a shot where lots of things are moving. I guess that if like one because people often like actors will base their marks on things being in certain places, won't they? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah.
I found it very interesting just how much people like that have a huge impact on the film without ever really being acknowledged.
Mm. So did you sort of make anything or shoot anything or put or do any extra work during the sort of the COVID years?
No, well, the short film I did was just before COVID. It was
Right.
literally just before. It was kind of like about a month or so before lockdown. So,
Because
um,
there was a shoot on I think it was like this little app it was a show that ran on Apple TV and it was mad because it was like a period piece so we all had to have these sort of big Victorian haircuts and these glued on mutton chops and that kind of thing and so we had to wear visors as in place of the masks
right.
as for the COVID protections and so what would happen was they would announce we were about to roll. We'd all have to go and put our masks somewhere out of shot, run back to our mark, do the scene, and then they just go and cut there, masks! And everyone just had to run and grab their mask and hope they got the right one. It's just
That's insane.
it's mad, yeah.
So, the other thing I was going to comment on is that there are two things I remember um, that I kind of always thought a director could learn a lot from. One was Roger Corman said that he'd heard that um, Alfred Hitchcock used to shoot the same film a dozen times and always use the first shot. For some reason, nobody quite understood. You always got the shot you needed the first time, but he'd do it a dozen times just to make sure. So Roger Corman, when he made his films, was like, "Well, I'll do the first shot, and then that'll use that." Because what's the point in doing a dozen more shots? And he didn't have the kind of budget that Alfred Hitchcock had. So I've always kind of thought, there's no need to do that many takes of the same thing. And the other thing I think sometimes people forget is the fact that there are rules supposedly for making films, but breaking those rules can make your film stand out so much. And doing slightly odd things like uh, Ingmar Bergman does a great thing in one of his films where he does a whole conversation. Well, there are two things in two different films. In one, he does a conversation with the camera. The point of view is from the person who's being talked to, and he does exactly the same conversation again straight after. The scene basically repeats, but from the point of view of the person who's doing the talking. So all you see is the reaction.
which film is that?
Oh, I can't remember the name of it now. It's two women in a beachside house, and they have this conversation at this table. And the first time, it's from the point of view of the woman who's being talked to, and then replays the entire scene from the opposite point of view, which is a really interesting way. And he also does this thing in a couple of films where he doesn't do it all the time, but he does a part of a conversation, or he'll do a conversation, and he'll do the opposite points of view. So instead of the camera facing the person who's talking, it's for facing the person who's they're talking to. So you kind of get this odd switch that you on what you would normally see on camera.
Yeah.
And I think things like that can really make things stand out. Anyway, enough of film theory. Um, so were you always wanting to do horror stuff, or have you done other genres, or what?
No, actually, it's relative. Like I generally speaking, I'm not much of a horror filmmaker. My lane is more comedy generally,
Right,
and but there's a thing of I remember that a few years ago. I was hearing repeatedly a load of sort of execs and experts in the industry were saying with utter confidence that comedy horror does not sell. There was like I think, oh, it doesn't sell. And me and my friends would be like, for a genre that doesn't sell, a lot seems to be selling, doesn't it? And and it was a thing of, I mean, I get why, particularly if people who are into sort of script reading, I get why they might come to that conclusion because it is a balance that I do totally understand why it wouldn't work in some areas. But it's feel like when I think back to my for my childhood, I didn't really watch horror films, but I watched films like the Laurel and Hardy murder case, which I maintain is one of the funniest Laurel and Hardy films.
right.
And there were, and I remember that I've always found humor in characters being scared when the audience knows that the stakes are not that high. And it was a thing of I'd only really I'd mostly made comedy films that were very slapstick, some silent films that were very in sort of kind of Buster Keaton-y sort of style. And then I made this film called Cold Caller,
Right.
which as of today, 20, well, we're recording to the 21st of March, it's just gone public. So you can go onto
Oh,
my
cool.
website account and you could just watch that free and gratis. Um, and that was, I don't know if I'd call that a horror so much, but it was definitely like a thriller, quite a dark thriller. It's a lot darker than what I'd done before. And then the producer that I met on that, who came in and sort of helped me recruit people, we liked what we saw from each other, and we said we want to make something together. And so and he really was keen on getting into the sort of like the horror um space. And so that was when Ash Sunday came about, was when we were looking through the ideas that we had ready to shoot, and that was one that came up. I do also have a comedy horror feature script, which is in a similar place to Ash Sunday, in a similar tone,
Right.
which we would love to make. It's just it's like all things struggling to raise the money at the moment. And
Yeah.
but that was we had like a little sort of career path plan as to let's do a sort of a comedy, a really good like proper comedy horror short with a crew scaled up, really push ourselves with it. If we get through that without strangling each other, we'll try and do a film. And so it's sort of it's a very recent sort of, I wouldn't say lane I fall into, but like a tributary from just doing straight comedy, effectively.
I think the thing is, I mean, comedy is very subjective. It's very kind of, there are many things that, especially with films, there are many films I've seen over the years. I know other people rave about and say, oh, they're absolutely hilarious, and I just cannot stand them because I don't find them funny at all. Um, and horror has in the past had this tendency to be the people involved in horror, especially fans and uh, some of the filmmakers, have had a tendency to be very serious about it. So, and it's the same with science fiction. So when you do a comedy horror or a comedy science fiction, you've kind of got the thing of like you've got the subjective side of it of a lot of people might not find it funny,
Mm.
and you've got the side of it where the other people who like horror and that won't find it horror enough. So
Mm.
getting that balance is really difficult, and I think he did very well.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad you sort of pick up on that because I said earlier that at where I am now, I saw more advantage in shooting stuff for myself than trying to sell it. That point about subjectivity is precisely why, because I feel like with a comedy script, so obviously the script it then gets shot on set and then it gets edited in the cutting room. You have got to just cross everything that at every stage of that process, every person working on it 100% shares your exact sense of humor.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's not going to land. And I feel like it's like when the collaboration between a writer and director, it's all right if they kind of sort of get on. It's brilliant if they share a vision. I feel like in comedy that's absolutely vital.
yeah,
And my I'm quite kooky, and there aren't many people like Joel who I'll explain an idea and they'll go, "Yes, carry on." Um,
yeah,
and so that was, and but it's a thing of with comedy horror. As I was saying that I get why a lot of readers would reject it outright, and it's what I feel happens a lot is I feel like both horror and laughter are based around tension
yeah,
and about it's a thing of like people laugh when tension breaks, and when tension is raised, people feel uncomfortable. And it's a thing of there's a danger with comedy horror that you can have the comedy side and the horror side at odds with each other, where the jokes are killing the tension that people are meant to feel from the horror. But if you can get them working with each other, where the tension builds and builds and builds and builds, and then you choose a moment for the laugh to break it, then it works a treat.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I've been to Fright Fest a couple of times now, and what really struck me about Fright Fest is, and it was the first time I'd kind of really experienced the sheer glee of the horror fandom, and it's yeah, obviously as you say, like they're the people that take it very seriously, and that had sort of been something that I had kind of respected, but kind of kept my distance from because I just figured I was too funny for it for many years. But then it was when I was at Fright Fest, and it's like, oh, these guys are just having a ball with this.
yeah.
And then I went to see this film. I don't, have you come across a film called Power Tool Cheerleaders versus the Boy Band of the Screeching Dead?
No, I can't say I've seen that. That's an
Because
interesting title.
because it was a friend of mine was in it, and a guy that the director of that film, Pat Higgins, has since he's a great guy who's been very encouraging. He's helped me out a few times, and he had his premiere there, and we went along the bunch of us to see that. and it's basically it's a musical comedy horror,
Right.
and that was it was going along to that and sort of watch that. It made me realize, oh, okay, this is somewhere like there is maybe room at the table here,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's I was thinking about like there's moments in like Shaun of the Dead where the bit where the zombie breaks into their room and they are freaking out. And like it is a horrific scene where they're inches from death and they start having to find the CDs to fling at the zombies and they're trying
yeah,
to preserve the rare vinyls. It's a hilarious scene, but the jokes are coming because the tension is up. And that's sort of I feel like that's where it's really done right, you know?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going. I mean, going back a bit now, I really love things that Abbott and Costello Make Frankenstein is an absolutely brilliant film because it does that mixture so well.
Do you know what, Andy? I do believe in the script for Ash Sunday. There's a moment in that script where Jamie Lee Hill's character of the brother reacts. He sees a very vivid hallucination at the table. I think in the script it was written as he just goes full Costello.
Yeah,
I was like, I absolutely wanted that, like that scene where the Dracula's coming out of the coffin and
yeah,
so yeah, that was actually a direct influence on Ash Sunday.
yeah. No, that's cool. I really like those. I like those old sort of comedy horrors like that. I really like, and I think they work really well. Ash Sunday, I think. The thing with, I was going to say, the thing with comedy as well, one of the things about it is the fact that if you read it, it can feel very dry because the thing about comedy for me, and I think sometimes you've got to have the thing in your head if you're reading it to understand it, because the thing about comedy is all in the delivery.
Mm.
If you could get somebody who is a really good actor to read a comedy script and it will sound dull and it won't be funny because they haven't got the timing and the delivery. And I think one of the things I would say about Ash Sunday is everybody in that cast delivered their lines perfectly. Everything was just right.
I mean, they are a marvelous bunch, that crew, and I think it's a thing of um, yeah, we were blessed with because I met Jamie who played Todd, I mentioned earlier, very last minute. I met him out in Cannes, like I think it was like 2 months before we were supposed to start shooting, and we hadn't filled the role. And I just realized, yeah, that the guy had absolutely that he understood the physical comedy that
Yeah,
and Lena just there are some actors that just have this ability to just deliver lines exactly the way they're meant to be said, and it was one of the moments that I've talked about sort of when you need to sort of like the difficulty in bringing your sort of voice and vision to life. There was a moment where there's a line where it's the classic gag of hypocritic humor in which she bullocks her daughter for swearing at the table and then immediately says what the fuck to her brother.
yeah,
And in the sort of like the read, we looked through the script and a couple of people have said, I'm not entirely sure about is this line motivated? It feels a little sort of hypocritical. And I just but and it was a thing I basically sort of we talked through. I said it's the instant shot off, it's the timing. And she delivered this line, and our producer, who'd read the script 100 times by this point, burst out laughing. And he'd
yeah,
never had before reading the script. And so yeah, it's she's a real force of nature, you know. I'd recommend to anyone who's hiring can really carry a film. And Neil, who was the it's like the husband in it, I've worked with him so many times now, and it's it in because we shot it in Brighton, and he's kind of like Brighton's Kevin Bacon in that you go to a film screening of like indie films in Brighton. He's probably going to be in one of them because he's a great guy, great to work with, and always delivers this performance that you kind of see a new bit of it each time. And I've been sort of looking forward to work with Tiffany and Agatha for so long, and it's like I'm honestly so glad I got to work with them now because I'm nervous that in a few years I won't be able to grab hold of them because like they're going to
Yeah,
be stars, you know? It's I would say I think about there's about two or three members of that cast that I'm actively looking to work with again soon potentially.
cool, cool. Cool. So with Ash Sunday in particular, did the idea come from anything, any particular place? Was it just a sort of like, oh, I wonder what would happen if, or was there something behind the actual story?
Well, that's an interesting point because I realized sort of making this one that I can't think about theme first. That's got to be the last piece that falls into place for me. And it was a thing of like I started off just basically going, what is a premise that fits the voice? And
Yeah,
I'm of the belief that you're a lot safer with anything comedic, just going for a funny premise and then doing it straight. And it's a thing of the humor will come a lot easier from just the scenario than relying on every single joke to land.
yeah,
And and I was looking for sort of log lines that were very extreme, very absurdist, that people would hear the log and they go, "Oh yeah, that's him. That's the kind of stuff he does. Yeah, that tracks." And I just came across the thing of hallucinations after scattering grandma's ashes on the Sunday roast. And I did a little Instagram poll of a couple of log lines, and that one overwhelmingly people said, "You must make that one."
yeah,
It was a thing of we in the early sort of stages of writing. I actually my gaffer came on and sort of helped write a little bit with this one. He did a draft and sort of did some notes for me and that kind of thing. And I knew I wanted it to be like a sort of a family sort of secret, and like that they're very very straight laced, and they discover that they're not so that there was literally things about they were quite a conservative family that got rich in the 80s, and then they discover that black magic was used to um, scam sort of stock traders or something. There was a whole subplot.
right,
And then it was really sort of as I was going back and forth with, because the crew are all storytellers and filmmakers in their own right, and so they were the good sounding board. And I kind of I can't remember whether I remembered this or whether it happened to come up that because I was very close to my grandparents as a kid. It was the thing of my parents would go on their date nights. They'd leave me with my grandmother. We'd we'd she would cook homemade southern fried chicken and chips, which were gorgeous, and we'd rent from Blockbuster the original VHS of one of the first three Star Wars films. And like that those really were the golden years, that kind of thing. And I just
yeah,
had fond memories of this magical house where they both lived. And it was years after they died, I discovered that their marriage had actually not been that happy, that they'd had a couple of affairs and like they were very seldom in the same room. And it was a thing of just having that realization. And does that put a taint on the sheen of those memories? Does it not? And right at the like 11th hour, I realized, okay, that is the theme. That is the personal bit of me that I put into this is
Yeah,
it's discovering sort of home truths about beloved people who are deceased after the chance has come to kind of talk to them about it.
yeah,
The thing I remember, I was speaking with Lena, our lead actress, and I hope she won't mind me saying this, but on the day that we came to shoot, there's quite a big scene at the climax where she confronts the ghost of her mother, the grandmother in this film, and she was doing the brilliant thing that all great actors do and asking me about where am I coming from on this line. And I talked through this, and we kind of went for the thing of it's always complicated when we lose people that we love, but ultimately what we had with them was enough. It's like it doesn't matter sort of what we find out, it matters what they were for us. And we were breaking this scene together, breaking the motivations, and by the end of it, we were both in tears. Like it's a daft, silly movie with
yeah.
fake pantomime horse heads and pratfalls and that kind of thing, but there was a genuine heart to it. But if I tried to start from that place, I don't think I could have done it. It wouldn't have worked as
No, no.
well. It has to be that has to be the last bit of the puzzle for me, which
The
is
thing,
nerve-wracking when you start because you don't know if you're going to find it. But it's the only way I can do it somehow. Mhm.
yeah, no, I think the thing about it is though, to get a good balance in something like comedy horror, or any kind of where you've got two genres, which are almost sort of like opposites, if you like. Um, you got to have the comedy basis, the comedy setup, and all that kind of thing, but you do need to have a certain amount of real heart and sort of the the people, sort of like the sort of element that people are going to be able to relate to
Oh,
as
absolutely.
on a more sort of emotional level, that side of it as well. So if you don't have a good balance of both, it's never going to work.
It's. I mean, I can't think of a genre that doesn't. I mean, there's a podcast of the screenwriting life with Megan Fove and Lauren McKenna, two former Pixar writers and current Pixar writers who are brilliant podcasts. I recommend to anyone with an interest in screenwriting. And they said a thing on that once about. I really hope they came up with this. If not, I'm sure that they'll say it again and cite the person who came that they said that funny plus serious is funny, and
Yeah,
funny plus funny is silly. And it's a thing of I'm all a big thing I always say with my actors is if we're doing a particularly kind of ridiculous scene, I'll say you've got to treat this like it's War and Peace, and like it's
yeah,
if there's a scene where a character is meant to be frightened by something they think is a ghost that isn't. Like that premise is funny. The actor has got to be selling pure abject terror.
yeah,
Otherwise, otherwise it's not going to be as funny.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, The effects and things that he had on Ash Sunday were really good. The lighting effects and the props and makeup and that kind of thing. So, do you have you got a team that you work with, or is it you know
This is the thing that I'm most delighted with this movie about is I Do Now.
right?
Basically, so on Cold Caller, which was the film that's just gone past the one before Ash Sunday, I met Joel, who I'd met Joel at a couple of networking events, and we'd hit it off, and I knew he was a good producer. And I basically called him and said, I'm doing this film pretty last minute. I need I need a sound recordist. And he said, I can introduce you to Shona. They're a great sound recordist. I can also send you my art director and Libby. And I was like, oh, that's amazing, brilliant. And then at the end of that shoot, he said, for your next film, I'll produce for real. And we brought back both Shona and Libby, and it's these guys, they were all either students at the time or recent graduates of the UK Film and TV School, which has now, I think, bought and absorbed the Met Film School.
Right.
Well, which was it was relatively recently set up in Brighton, and so that they were effectively they it was like a student crew largely, but my God, you would not know it.
Yeah.
They were as professional as any crew I've ever seen working on as an extra, and it was a thing of they'd all just come off the bat. I think Neil talked about this in the Q&A at Romford, but they'd all just come off the back of a very grueling feature that was mostly shot at night,
Right.
and they were all knackered and a little bit pissed off, and yet it worked like clockwork. It's like if that was them on 40% battery, I'd love to see them when they're fully rested and happy and have been treated well by the director and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it was honestly like working with this big crew and they who are all, as I said, all sort of storytellers in of their own right. My editor for this one was just wrapped on a film with a friend of mine that he's directed, which I'm sure is going to blitz the award circuit and that kind of thing. And it was a thing of it was the first time I was able to just direct the film and not like be the sort of like the management manager and the business guy and the guy making all the calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like
Right.
it was really a magical 4 days. I had the time of my life making this film because of this crew. And I basically said to them, I want you all back, either for the next one or the one after that, or for every film since. And yeah, so I found this crew in this film, and I hope I'm making films with them in like 10, 20 years, honestly, because
Yeah.
they were amazing. They
Well, I
are.
mean, it all worked well. It looked good. Everything worked brilliantly. Is Ash Sunday still doing the rounds of festivals and things like that at the moment?
It is, yeah. We've I've taken a little sort of I usually had a bit of a sort of a strategy with festivals to sort of start with online ones and then get some discounted ones and then sort of get to a few ones that you can travel for, that kind of thing. And with Ash Sunday, we submitted to fewer festivals, but we've submitted to ones that we are ready, willing, and able to go to
Right.
because it is a thing that
Sorry.
we do. We were reasonably confident that we would get into places, and we thought we would love to go and take this around and show up and represent with it. I was gutted actually because obviously we met at Romford.
Yeah.
Joel, my producer, lives not far from Romford,
All right.
and this was the first one that he was free to be able to go to. And then, like 2 days or something before the festival, he got hired on a Netflix movie.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's like, oh, it would have been just round the corner for him. And
Yeah.
so bless him, he hasn't actually been to a festival yet. But I'm normally I put these things in for about a year. But I mean, given that we did get it, we did have we did tart up the visual effects in October and that kind of thing, and tart up the grade a little bit. I suppose I could say that October is our limit to stop submitting, but it's like a thing of I sort of want to keep entering until until we get all until we get everyone to one really. But
Will you eventually put it out as you did as you have done with Cold Call, or put it out for general sort of?
might potentially it's it's a thing of I've been having some conversations recently about sort of short films and their place in the film industry.
Right.
And it's like in the last, there've been sort of two or three serendipitous things in the last sort of couple of weeks of people talking about um, places that will host short films because I know that Amazon was doing it for a while. I don't know if they're doing it so much now, but
There are some on there, but there's not as many as there were.
Hmm. Yeah, that was what I was feeling. But I've had a couple of conversations about potentially hosting it somewhere, and it's sort of it's early days, and we'll see when we get to the end of the run. But it may go public, or we may put it up on some kind of platform. I don't know. We shall see what how the industry's looking.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. So, as to the future, do you have any projects that you're already working on now, or that you plan to be starting soon?
I do indeed, yes. I have I have this. I mentioned earlier that I have the comedy horror script, which is named Vegan Vampires, which
Okay,
um, it's a script that actually was a Page finalist and an Austin second rounder a few years ago. So it got some the script got some proper buzz, and it's one of those things of it's locked in and ready to go, more or less. We're just raising the money for that. And that is a very, very slow process. So while we're raising the money for that, I am also in sort of early pre-production on a micro budget feature, which is a comedy action.
right.
I've just had the first sort of feedback from Joel about that. He's back on producing. And we're when when abouts is this podcast likely to go live?
Probably next week.
Next week. All right. Well, I tell you what, I'll say this for now because I probably will announce it in some way around that time. But basically, it's a comedy action that is called The Whistleblower and the Whistleblower.
Okay,
And it's about a lifeguard who doesn't read the job application and becomes a bodyguard for an informant.
right.
It's gonna be very in the style of like the old Will Hay movies blended with the early Jackie Chan films and that kind of thing.
Okay.
We've got a great sort of fight choreographer on board to work with us on it, and a couple of actors have said to me over the years they'd love to do some action stuff, and I in my sort of other sort of like my day job, my sort of I don't know what this says about me that my grown-up job is that I'm a assistant martial arts instructor at a dojo.
Okay.
So I've always been sort of like had a little toe in the action. I know a guy from that who is a special actor, does fight scenes and that kind of thing. So it's just one of those things of while we're raising money for a slightly basically a film that will be like Ash Sunday on a bigger scale, we're gonna basically make this um we're gonna make this feature for basically how whatever we can manage in the meantime, and I'm actually really looking forward to it. I reckon it's gonna be a lot of fun, and it's one of those things where the stars seem to have kind of aligned for this one. So
Yeah, I mean, they both sound very interesting projects. I've looked forward to seeing those, definitely. Well, I wish you all the best with the rest of the festival run for Ash Sunday.
thank you very much.
All the best with with your new and future projects. Thank you very much for being on here and doing the interview. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thanks for having me on. That's been really nice to touch base, and I really appreciated your review for Ash Sunday.
Thank you. As usual, I will put up links to social media and to a trailer for Ash Sunday so that you can check it out yourselves and then look out for it in other festivals and places in the future. We'll be back again with proper episodes and stuff like that at some point. Until then, goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
the Sciforror Film Podcast.